This morning I walked past my stove and caught a smell, just a little wisp of something, and it stopped me cold. Took me right back to being 7 years old, standing in my grandmother's kitchen on a cold January morning. That wood stove was ticking and popping, and she was humming low to herself, stirring a pot of pinto beans that had been going since the night before. The whole house smelled like salt pork and wood smoke and something so good it nearly made your eyes water. We didn't have much. Honey, not much at all, but that woman could take almost nothing and turn it into something that made you feel rich, made you feel loved, made you feel like everything was going to be just fine. If you ever had to stretch a dollar so far it nearly snapped. If your mama made something out of nothing and it tasted like heaven anyway, then baby, this video is for you. This isn't just a cooking video. This is a remembering video. We're going to walk through 20 meals, 20 real, honest, from the heart meals that poor Black families, working families, and country families all across the South lived on for generations. Some of you will recognize every single one. Some of you younger folks might not know a one of them, and that's all right. That's why we're here. These weren't fancy meals. Nobody was putting them in magazines, but they fed children, kept families warm through hard winters, and stretched a little of this and a little of that until everybody at the table had something on their plate. The people who made them deserved every bit of credit. Pull up a chair and let's go back together. Before we start, I need you to stay with me until we reach number 18, crackling bread. My grandmother made that bread the very night before she passed from this earth, and I have not made it once in my own kitchen without feeling her right there beside me. We'll get there, but stay with me. All right, let's begin. Number 1, pinto beans and cornbread. If there is one meal that held poor Southern families together more than any other, it is a pot of pinto beans and a skillet of cornbread. This was everyday food. Monday through Sunday, food. The meal that meant the rent got paid and the lights stayed on because dinner only cost about 30 cents. You started your beans the night before, picking through them on the kitchen table, pulling out little rocks and anything that didn't belong. Then you covered them in cold water to soak overnight. Come morning, you drained them, put them in your biggest pot with salt pork or a ham hock, covered with fresh water, and let them cook low and slow all day. My grandmother always said beans weren't ready until they were so soft they'd melt on your tongue. That pot liquor, that rich smoky broth, was liquid gold. The cornbread went into a cast iron skillet seasoned for 30 years. Hot grease in the bottom. Pour in your cornmeal batter. Just cornmeal, egg, buttermilk, a little salt, and slide it into a hot oven until the top was golden and the edges pulled away clean. Break off a piece and dunk it into those beans and honey. That was one of the finest things a human being could put in their mouth. This was dignity on a plate. Don't let anybody tell you different. Number 2, fried fatback. Fatback was salt-cured pork, mostly fat with maybe a streak of meat, and it came in a slab you could buy for almost nothing. It kept well, and that was the beauty of it. You sliced it thin and fried it in a dry cast iron pan because fatback has plenty of its own grease. It sizzled and popped and curled up at the edges, and you had to watch it close because it could go from perfect to burned in a minute and a half. Done right, it was crispy outside, chewy in the middle, and satisfyingly salty. You put it alongside beans, crumbled it over greens, or sometimes just ate it with bread and called that breakfast. My daddy ate fried fatback nearly every morning of his working life and never once complained. Number 3, pot liquor soup. When you cooked a big pot of collard greens or turnip greens long and slow with a ham hock or smoked turkey wing, what you were left with in that pot was something almost magical. That dark, rich, smoky, slightly bitter broth was pot liquor. Poor families knew something that rich families took years to figure out. That broth had more nourishment and more flavor than almost anything else on the stove. You could thin it a little, drop in chunks of cornbread, let them soak up all that goodness until they were almost like dumplings. Some folks added a potato or a piece of onion. That became the whole meal, not the greens, not the meat, but the pot liquor itself. It smelled like earth and smoke and the South and warmed you from the inside out like nothing else could. Number 4, flour gravy. Don't you let anyone call this poor man's gravy like it's something to be ashamed of. This gravy is the reason a lot of children went to school with something in their stomachs when there was nothing else in the house. You made it with drippings from whatever meat you'd cooked. Plain white flour stirred in fast until it turned a light golden brown, then milk, or water if you had no milk, poured in slowly while you kept stirring until it thickened up smooth and creamy and salty. You poured it over biscuits, over bread, over rice. My mother made flour gravy at least twice a week, and when I smell it now, that nutty, toasty smell of flour browning in hot fat, it takes me straight back to her kitchen every time. Number 5, stewed tomatoes over white bread. This might sound strange if you've never had it, but stewed tomatoes over white bread was a genuine meal in a lot of southern homes, especially in summer when the garden gave more than you could eat fresh. You peeled your ripe tomatoes, score them, drop them in boiling water a minute, and that skin slips right off. Then cut them up and cook them down with a little butter, sugar, salt, and pepper until thick and sweet and jammy. You laid slices of white bread in a bowl and ladled those hot tomatoes over the top, letting the bread soak up every bit of that juice until it was swollen and soft and tasted like pure summer. My grandmother grew tomatoes every year. She said the garden was her insurance policy, and she was right. These first 5 are bringing something up in me. My grandmother's house had one table, one long wooden table in the kitchen. On Sunday afternoons after church, that table seated 12 people, sometimes more. Aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors who had nowhere else to be. I always wondered how she fed all these people. The answer was always one big pot, always cornbread, always enough. Not because she had money, but because she knew how to make what she had go as far as it needed to. Nobody left that table hungry, not one soul. Number 6, hoe cakes. Hoe cakes are among the oldest foods in African American cooking. Just cornmeal, a little salt, water or buttermilk mixed to a thick batter, dropped by the spoonful into a hot greased skillet, and cooked on both sides until golden and crispy outside and tender in the middle. The name comes from a time when field workers cooked these on the flat blade of a garden hoe over an open fire. They survived because they were good, filling, and required almost nothing. You ate them for breakfast with molasses drizzled over or alongside beans and greens for supper. My great aunt made a stack every Saturday morning, and the children lined up like it was Christmas. Crispy cornmeal with sweet syrup running down the sides. That is simple, beautiful joy. Number 7, neck bones and rice pork. Neck bones were some of the cheapest cuts at the butcher, sometimes thrown in near for nothing. But what those bones could do with time and love was remarkable. You seasoned them well and browned them first, because browning builds flavor. Then you covered them with water and simmered for 2 or 3 hours until the meat was falling off tender and the broth had turned rich and deep from all that collagen. Then you added washed rice right into that pot and let it cook until it absorbed all that smoky, savory broth. What you ended up with wasn't soup and wasn't stew. It was its own beautiful thing. And every scrap of meat off those neck bones was sweet and tender and good. Number 8, fried green tomatoes. Everyone has heard of fried green tomatoes, but this wasn't a restaurant dish. It was born of necessity. When your plants gave more than you could eat before season's end, you picked them green and fried them. You sliced them a 1/4 inch thick, salted them, let them sit, then dredged them in cornmeal and flour with salt and pepper. Into hot lard or bacon grease they went, cooking until that coating was deep golden and crunchy and the tomatoes just softened through. The taste is tart, tangy, savory, completely different from a ripe tomato. My mother said fried green tomatoes were proof that God had a sense of humor, taking something not quite ready and making it better for it. Number 9, sweet potato and onion skillet. People hear sweet potato and think Thanksgiving and marshmallows. I'm talking about the savory weeknight version, the working people version. You diced your sweet potatoes, sliced a big onion, put them in a skillet with fatback grease, salt, and pepper, and cooked them over medium heat until the potatoes were tender inside and caramelized outside while the onions turned golden and sweet. That was the whole dish. Those sweet potatoes had a natural sweetness that felt indulgent even when it wasn't, and the onions gave it real depth. For many families, sweet potatoes were the difference between eating and not eating. Number 10, chicken foot stew. I know some of you just made a face. Come on back here. Because chicken feet have been feeding people for centuries across Africa, the Caribbean, and the American South, and I will not let them be forgotten. Chicken feet were free or close to it. You cleaned them, poured boiling water over them, peeled off the outer skin, trimmed the nail, then put them in a pot with onion, garlic, a bay leaf, and water, and simmered them a good long while. What those feet released was extraordinary. All that collagen turned the broth thick and glossy and rich. Add potatoes, carrots, a little cabbage, and you had a stew that stuck to a grown man's ribs on the coldest winter day. My grandmother made it every first cold snap of fall, and the smell meant the family was going to be all right. My mother had a saying I still hear in her voice today. We didn't waste nothing. Waste was a sin in this house, and she meant every word. Bones boiled for broth. Stale bread became bread pudding. Fat got rendered and saved in a tin by the stove. Vegetable peels went into the stock pot. Everything had a second life. She wasn't being frugal for the sake of it. She was being wise, honoring the value of what she had and teaching us to do the same. Number 11, salt pork and cabbage. Salt pork and cabbage was cold weather food. When the temperature dropped and you needed something to warm your bones, this was the answer. A head of cabbage was cheap. Salt pork was cheap. Together in a pot with water and seasoning, they filled the whole house with a welcoming smell. You started the salt pork in a little water to release its fat, then added cabbage in big wedges, not shredded, because big pieces hold up through long braising, and let everything cook until the cabbage was tender and silky and full of smoky flavor. A splash of apple cider vinegar at the end brightened the whole pot. You ate it in a bowl with cornbread, humble as the day is long and twice as satisfying. Number 12, butter beans with ham hock. Butter beans, what some folks call lima beans, though Southerners will tell you they're not the same thing, are among the most underrated legumes in the world. Soak them overnight, then cook them low and slow with a ham hock, onion, garlic, and a bay leaf. After 2 or 3 hours, those beans got creamy, almost melting on your tongue, and the broth turned velvety and rich. You pulled out the hock, picked every bit of that sticky meat off the bone, and stirred it back into the pot. Ladled over rice or alongside cornbread, it was deeply satisfying in the way only slow-cooked food can be. Number 13, cornmeal mush. Cornmeal mush has nearly vanished from memory outside of certain communities, and it deserves better than that. You stirred cornmeal into boiling salted water, stirring constantly because cornmeal lumps if you look away until it thickened into a soft porridge and a spoon stood right up in it. Eat it fresh with butter and salt, or pour it into a pan, let it firm overnight, slice it in the morning, and fry those slices until golden and crispy outside and creamy within. With syrup poured over that fried mush carried a child through an entire school day. My daddy ate so much of it growing up he couldn't look at it for years. Then my grandmother made it after he'd been away working for months, and he sat right down at that table and cried. Some food goes deeper than food. Number 14, canned salmon. One can of salmon could feed a whole family if you knew what you were doing with it. You mix the salmon, bones and all, because those soft bones are edible and full of calcium, with a beaten egg, crushed saltine crackers, diced onion, salt, pepper, and a little mustard. You formed patties and fried them until each side was browned and crispy. You ate them with grits tucked between bread with a tomato slice or with hot sauce alongside vegetables. For the money, there was almost nothing more efficient or more delicious, and I make salmon patties to this very day. Number 15, egg gravy over biscuits. You started the same as flour gravy, drippings in the pan, flour stirred in until nutty, then added milk and let it come to a simmer, and just before it finished, cracked 2 or 3 eggs right in and stirred quickly, letting them cook into thin, silky strands throughout. Thick, creamy, and protein-rich in a way plain gravy wasn't. You split your homemade biscuits and ladled that egg gravy right over. A whole family ate well for almost nothing, and everybody left full. In my grandmother's house, it was a special occasion. Eggs to spare was its own kind of good news. How many of you are nodding right now? How many of you are saying, my grandmother made that exact same thing? If that's you, go down to the comments and tell me which recipe hit you hardest, which dish brought someone back. I read every single comment, and hearing your stories is one of the greatest joys of my life. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that right now. We have so much more to share. All right, back to our list. There was a woman in our neighborhood when I was small named Miss Ida. Whenever she heard a family was struggling, job lost, somebody sick, a new baby, she showed up at the door with a pot. Always a pot of something, always enough. Nobody asked her. She just came, because that's what community looked like. You didn't let people around you go without if you had anything to give. What she brought wasn't charity. It was love made visible, care you could taste. I think about Miss Ida every time I cook for someone else. Number 16, fried bread. Dough boys. Different families called these different things. Dough boys, fried bread, but the idea was the same. Simple dough from flour, baking powder, salt, and just enough water or milk to bring it together. Let it rest, pinch off pieces, stretch them flat with your hands until thin and beautifully irregular. Into hot oil they went, puffing up and turning golden, crispy outside and soft and chewy within, sweet with syrup or jam or savory with beans ladled over. My uncle ate his with nothing but salt. When I make them, I feel connected to every culture that ever had flour and fire and made something wonderful from just those two things. Number 17. Black-eyed peas and hog jowl. Most folks know black-eyed peas mean good luck on New Year's Day, but this wasn't only a New Year's tradition. Black-eyed peas with hog jowl was regular. Everyday food because the peas grew easily, stored well, and cost nearly nothing. Hog jowl is the smoked, cured cheek of the pig with a deeper, more intense flavor than a ham hock. You cooked it with your peas low and slow with onion, garlic, and water, and the flavor that jowl gave those peas was smoky, rich, almost sweet. Serve them over rice alongside cornbread or as hoppin' john with the rice cooked right in the same pot. Food that asks very little and gives everything back. Number 18. Crackling bread. I told you at the beginning we'd get here. And here we are. Crackling bread is cornbread made with cracklings. What you get when you render pork fat slowly until all the moisture cooks away, and you're left with golden, crunchy, deeply savory little pieces. You stir them right into your cornbread batter, cornmeal, egg, buttermilk, flour, baking soda, salt, and bake it in a hot cast iron skillet. The cracklings give it pockets of richness and crunch. The outside is crispy from that hot iron. The inside is moist and tender and full of flavor you cannot fake or replace. My grandmother made crackling bread on the last evening I ever spent in her house. I was grown, sitting at that same old wooden table, and she brought that skillet to the table, still hot, cut it in wedges, and set it in front of me without a word. We sat together, ate butter beans alongside it, and talked about nothing in particular, the way you do when you don't know it's the last time. She was gone the next morning, peaceful in her sleep. 91 years old, I have made crackling bread many times since that night. Every time I cut into that skillet, I see her hands, her small, sure, knowing hands. I am grateful she taught me, grateful she let me sit in that kitchen and just be near her. That's what these recipes carry. It isn't just food, it's the people who made it. Don't you ever forget how to make crackling bread. Number 19. Chitterlings. Chitterlings, chitlins, as most folks call them, are a deeply significant part of African American food history, and I won't skip them. They are cleaned and cooked hog intestines, the parts enslaved people were given, the parts slaveholders didn't want. Black cooks transformed them through extraordinary skill and care into something beloved by generations. Taking what was discarded and making it cherished is one of the most profound stories in American cooking. Cleaning chitlins is a long, serious job requiring multiple careful rinses. Then you boil them for hours with onion, garlic, hot pepper, and vinegar. They cook down until tender and almost silky, absorbing all those seasonings. The people who love them will tell you there is nothing else like them. They deserve respect and they deserve remembering. Number 20, syrup bread. We're ending right where many families began their mornings and finished their hardest days, with a piece of bread and something sweet. Syrup bread wasn't really a recipe so much as a practice. You took whatever bread you had, white bread, cornbread, a biscuit, and poured a ribbon of cane syrup or sorghum molasses or even just sugar dissolved in a little warm water right over the top. That was all. Breakfast when there was nothing else. The after-school treat before after-school treats existed. The last thing you gave a tired child before bed when the pantry was bare. Sweet, soft, simple. It filled a space in you, not just in your stomach, but somewhere higher up. Somebody cared enough to give you something sweet. Somebody took what little they had and made it feel like a gift. My mother gave me sugar bread on days when she was quietly worried about money, though I didn't know it then. I thought it was something special made just for me. And in every way that mattered, that's exactly what it was. Let's walk back through all 20 like a blessing. Pinto beans and cornbread, fried fatback, pot liquor soup, flour gravy, stewed tomatoes over white bread, hoe cakes, neck bones and rice, fried green tomatoes, sweet potato and onion skillet, chicken foot stew, salt pork and cabbage, butter beans with ham hock, cornmeal mush, canned salmon patties, egg gravy over biscuits, fried bread, doughboys, black-eyed peas and hog jowl, crackling bread, chitterlings, and syrup bread. 20 meals, 20 stories, 20 reasons to be grateful. Now, hear me before you go. These were not meals of poverty, not really. Yes, they came from hard times made by people who didn't have enough and found a way anyway. But what they truly represent is love, resourcefulness, dignity, the quiet knowledge that if you have good hands and a willing heart, you can feed your family and make them feel cared for no matter what's in the pantry. The women and men who made these meals were problem solvers, artists, the steady center of their families. The table they set was sacred ground. So if you remember any of these dishes, make them. Make them and remember who taught you. And if you never knew them, learn them now. This knowledge belongs to all of us. I love you all. I'll be back real soon. Next time, we're talking about the real Sunday dinners, the after church ones, when my grandmother pulled out everything she had and made the whole family feel like royalty. You do not want to miss that one. Until then, keep cooking with love. That's all any of us ever really